Hi everyone and welcome to another video. I'm Laurent Macquart and today it's time to talk about the books that I've read in the first half of January. I finished 4 books, one of which I have read for the Invisible Cities project, specifically for Argentina. If you want to know more about the Invisible Cities project, I suggest you watch the video that I will tag up here somewhere or down below about what it entails and what my plans are. But for Argentina, I read the book Dead Girls by Selva Almada. And as I'm going to do a separate video each month talking about my Invisible Cities experience and what I have read or seen or eaten for that country, I'll talk about Dead Girls more in that video. But for now, suffice to say that it is non-fiction and it talks about the violence towards women and the femicide, the death of women, the murder of women in Argentina in the 80s and maybe also the beginning of the 90s. And she focuses on 3 women, but she also talks about other violent episodes. Now, staying in the realm of experience of women, I have also finally read The Mercies by Kieran Millwood Hardgrave. I had initially planned for this to be my last book of 2020, but things didn't go as planned, and in the end it was my first book of 2021. And that is still also very nice because I love the cover and I love the sound of this. So in this book, we have a small village at the north of Norway, and the book starts in a night where there is a huge storm, and in that storm all of the men die. All of the men are out fishing, and the boats perish, and therefore the men also die. And so the book is about what happens to the village, to the women that are still in the village. They grieve their losses, but they also have to pick up their lives. They have to start finding food. They have to start caring for themselves and take on roles that the men usually had. And it's about the tensions that brings with it, combined with the grief. And then we also have a man that is sent to the village, a commissioner, to do research on what they believe are witches that are there and how that turns out. And it's told from the point of view of one of the women from the village and the wife of the commissioner as she goes with him to this very secluded little village in the north of Norway. I really like this. I really like the themes. I hadn't expected it to be so much about grief as well and what that does to different people. I thought the writing also was very fitting with what the theme was. It was kind of mysterious and dark, and I don't know, I had a winter feel to the writing, if that makes sense. Yeah, I ended up really liking the book. It wasn't the 5-star read that I expected it to be, but I can't really put my finger on why that is and what I had expected that it didn't do. But yeah, I'd really recommend this book if you're interested in these kind of topics because it's very well done, and there's a kind of twisty thing that I initially didn't see coming that was also very nicely done. So that is The Mercies by Kieran Millwood Hardgrave. Also, let's say again how beautiful this cover is. The book that I read on audio the last 2 weeks, by the way, yes, I forgot to tell you, I didn't DNF a book in the first half of January. Is that a sign for the rest of the year? Let's hope so. But the audiobook that I finished was the first volume of the Deavabad trilogy, and that is The City of Brass by S.S. Chakraborty. So it's fantasy, and it's fantasy based on the Islamic culture, which I liked very much because a lot of the fantasy, Western fantasy, I should say, there's always similar types of roles. We always have some kind of magic, there's possibly dragons and elves and dwarves, and I like fantasy that kind of steps away from that and that takes on layers of another culture than the Western European culture. So I really like this for that. It was based on the Arabic world. So in this fantasy world we kind of focus on a group of people that are descendants of kind of fire gods, and there are different clans, different families, and different religions also, and I think certain families also belong to certain clans, and then some have different areas that they rule. And we meet a young girl who she thinks she's human, she doesn't know anything about the magical world, she lives in Cairo, and when some things happen she realizes that the fact that she heals very quickly is in fact magical, and she is apparently the descendant of the Nahids, and the Nahids are a family that have been murdered, and she's the sole remaining survivor. And there is another, I was gonna say a person, but he's not really a person. He's a deva. She's a deva as well. So I don't really still get how the family lines and the names and everything go. But both of them, he's kind of her protector. They go to Deavabad, the city that her family used to rule, and which is kind of the capital also of their society. That is in fact where the king is, and the king and the family that now rules are the ones that made sure that her family weren't in power, but they're not the ones that made sure that her family died. See, I have the things very straight in my head. So we have her point of view of her going to that city and then being the Nahi, the hope, because her family, what she does is that they can heal people. And for the past 20 years, there were no Nahis, and that caused a lot of trouble. And we also have the point of view of the second son of the king, who is a religious fanatic, but at the same time he also has a soft spot for the mixed bloods. And the mixed bloods, I can't remember what their names are a big part of the political struggles that there are, because the Nahids used to hate the mixed bloods, but at the same time, I have no idea. Everybody seems to be against the mixed bloods, and there are different levels of being against them. And that is what makes this book interesting, is how all of these clans and families and ideologies kind of mix and match. So I'm now reading the second book, and I am also finding that very interesting, because we take a jump in time. Anyway, I'm loving this book. I'm not explaining it very well, but it's a cool world. So the fourth book that I finished, and the last one I'm going to talk about, is Le liseur du 627 by Jean-Paul Didierlaurent. This was a fantastic book. I read it with a friend from my real life book club here in the Netherlands, Claudia, who makes awesome illustrations, by the way. I'll link her Instagram down below. We had decided a couple of days ago that we were going to read this, and that this weekend we were going to be halfway through and then talk about it, but we actually finished it in 2 days because it was such a wonderful read and such a quick read. So the premise of this is that we have a man who all his life has been bullied because of his name, and because of that he kind of tries to be completely invisible, and he works for a company that pulverizes books. So apparently in the book industry, the books that aren't sold or that are misprints are all pulverized and made into pulp to be recycled or into other books or into something else. And he works for the company that does that in Paris. And he hates his job because for him, he's a very sensible soul and he loves these books. So what he does is that every day he steals a couple of pages, and then the day afterwards he reads those pages, who are not from the same books, they're just random pieces of paper. He reads them to the people that are in the train that he uses to get to his work. So that's kind of how it starts. And then a couple of things happen, and we learn a little bit more about this man and about his life, and what the sensitivity that he has towards books, towards life, where that brings him. It's such a sweet book. The writing is very sweet. Sometimes I have an issue with French writing, or the way some people speak in French, that they use a lot of adjectives and a lot of adverbs, and everything has to be made super rich and use different words, more complicated terms, when they could have used one word. So they're not going to say humans, they're going to say, oh, the biped or whatever. And usually I find that makes it way too rich. And in this one, it was done marvelously. It felt very natural in a way that enriched the experience, the reading experience, instead of making it this very heavy thing and this complicated thing to read. So in this was just like a dream. Claudia and I discussed that it was as if you were somewhere on a terrace in Aix-en-Provence, just eating a croissant. It's very funny also as well. There's little things that happen that are just hilarious, that you honestly laugh out loud, and it's very heartwarming. So if you're looking for something that is a bit nonsensical, that is heartwarming, that is very sweet, that is something that will lift you up, and something that is also somewhere about the love of books, then you will absolutely love this. I really highly recommend it. It was brilliant. And it's very short, so you can read it in a couple of days if you want to. So, and it has also been translated to the reader from the 627 or something like that. I'll link that below. Anyway, those were the 4 books that I have read in the first half of January, and I'm currently, well, I'm doing a couple of buddy reads, but I'm currently mostly making my way through Stand from the Beginning from Ibram X. Kendi. And as you can see, I'm not very far, but there's so much information in this. It's wonderful, and it's about, well, the definitive history of racist ideas in America and how racism was designed for white male mostly to benefit from it. So it's fascinating, but I'm going to take my time with it because it has way too much information. So that's that. Anyway, I'll talk to you in the comments. Have you read any of these books? What have you been reading? What was the start of your 2021 reading like? See you next time. Thank you for watching.